Can you see me? Sorry about that. I was on
No.
Zoom.
Yeah, hi, how are you? I was just talking about how human we are, right? Even as
Yeah.
I think I'd sent you a Zoom link, which I usually do, but then when I hop on live for IG lives, I just have folks join on. But it's so
Okay.
good to have you. It's so good to
Yeah.
see
Thank
you
you for having
here.
me. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah, listen, no pressure. I already blew your trumpet plenty because I was kind of keeping my keeping our friends engaged. I was talking about how you walk on water, how you solve world
Oh, yeah.
problems,
The feelings mutual. Feelings
and
mutual.
how you're helping so many kids with a lot of with obesity issues and endocrine problems. But I know I didn't do it justice, so I would love it if you introduce yourself. And as a reminder, hi everyone, I'm Dr. Funke Brown. I'm the founder of Restful Sleep MD, where I am so passionate about helping moms and children achieve good sleep, kind of change their relationship with sleep so that they can live better. And maybe you could introduce yourself, Dr. Mehra.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm Dr. Mehra. I am a pediatric endocrinologist and I'm a board certified obesity medicine specialist. I practice in Virginia, but I do telemedicine also in 4 states. So I do telemedicine in Virginia, Maryland, Iowa, and Florida. And my focus has been on diabetes prevention and treatment of overweight in children. And there are very limited pediatric physicians who are treating pediatric obesity and weight management. And there are just so many resources, there's so much information on the internet and available everywhere. And I think a lot of people just have information overload, which is one of my patients
Yeah.
said to me this week, that I have information overload. I don't know what to do. I don't know what
Yeah.
to feed my kids. I don't even know what to do anymore. And that's really what I want to do, is to really try to help those parents and those kids who have issues with regards to their weight and really understand food. And I think this topic that we're talking about today is really dear to my heart because it's so important. I talk to my
Yeah.
own kids about it all the time. And so I'd be happy to, share all this information with your audience as well.
I know. Thank you so, so much. Can you just tell some of our guests, because I do have, I have a lot of moms here. Not many of them, some of them are not in the medical field, but really, what does a pediatric endocrinologist do?
Yeah, so a pediatric endocrinologist, so I'm a pediatrician, so doctor for kids, and I subspecialize in endocrinology. So endocrinology is all hormone conditions in kids. So we look at growth, we look at diabetes, we look at thyroid, we evaluate kids for early puberty, late puberty. We look at girls who have menstrual problems, and if it's their hormones or if it's not their hormones. And so really that is the gist of what a pediatric
Mm,
endocrinologist does. And then a lot of our practice is also focused on diabetes. And so I treat a lot of children with type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes. And then my goal really over the last, probably I would say 5 years, has been what can we do to prevent some of these chronic illnesses like
mm,
diabetes? Because they're just sometimes so devastating for children
yeah.
and their families. And so I really have been focused on education and empowering
Mm,
patients to
mm,
learn about everything they can about their disease process and their hormones.
yeah.
And my goal is to treat them like my own family, but I would treat, how I treat my own family, and just really make sure they understand from the really basic level and meet them where they are.
Hmm. Hmm. No, that is so powerful. And really, I think that really makes a nice segue to what we're talking about, right? Like you talked about diabetes. And one thing I'm noticing now is a lot of children are developing adult type conditions or what we thought were, right?
Mm-hmm,
Like, hypertension,
mm-hmm,
diabetes, and one of the connecting links to that is obesity,
mm-hmm.
right? With all the complications of obesity, we're getting all of this. So can you tell us what is driving this now, such almost like an obesity crisis,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even in the adult population as well as pediatric population. What's going on with that? I know there have been some people that have talked about the fact that during COVID, there was a lot of people that were not really moving around much. Kids were not as
Mm-hmm.
active. Maybe that
Mm-hmm.
was driving it.
Mm-hmm.
But what are some of your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so really the incidence of obesity in the adult population has been
Yeah.
increasing
Yeah.
astronomically. So really since the 1980s, we've seen like a significant increase in obesity in the adult population. And recently we've seen that expand to children as well. And
Mm.
so, obesity really is, when we talk about obesity, we talk about obesity as similar to a chronic illness or chronic
Yeah.
disease. But there's a complex interplay. So there's genetics that are
Mm.
involved, there's environmental factors involved, and then there is, just things that we don't know about that really are contributing to obesity. I think at the most basic level, and what we've always been taught as pediatricians to say is it's really focused on food consumption, so increased caloric intake, and then we always talk to our patients about eating less and moving
Yeah.
more, so more exercise and more energy expenditure. I think it's been a combination of things. So it's been due to us really migrating as a population to eating more food that is fast and processed and less energy dense, so less focused on nutrients. And then, fast food outlets, aggressive marketing of unhealthy foods to children and families.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you go to any grocery store, there is no shortage of food that you can buy.
Yeah.
And it's really overwhelming, and their food tastes good, and, it's quick. And so I think, kids like that.
Yeah.
The other piece of that is that we have introduced technology, like, rapidly. The iPhone introduction, and then, it's just, really taken off from there. And so kids are exposed to technology, and whereas before they used to be playing outside and running around, they are really not exposed to that anymore. So there's not, a lot of time for play and exercise. And then, the environment that we live in. So when I first started in my residency, I lived in Chicago, and I was involved in the obesity projects for children, or weight management projects for children there. And when I went to the inner city, I was in inner city Chicago, and I went to the grocery stores, and a donut at the time was 99 cents, for, I mean, I don't want to say how old I am, but, for, a 6-pack of donuts was really, really cheap. And the fruit was double or triple the price, right? And so for a family who's trying to feed their kids or have them have a healthy breakfast, and you're trying to weigh the cost of food, and then you're looking at, how it's going to fill your child up, I think, you'd pick the donut. And so I think there's policy interventions also that need to, go into play. So I think it's multifactorial. There's genetics involved too. There's certain genetic conditions that make it harder to lose weight. So I think there's a lot of factors. I will say that the COVID pandemic did exacerbate it by much, higher, because we were just all sitting at home and eating and not exercising. And so we have seen a much higher incidence of diabetes in children since COVID.
Yep. Yeah. And it's interesting you say that. Another thing I've seen since COVID has been a higher rate of obstructive sleep apnea. And that's also driven by the fact that a lot more children have gained so much weight, which is a risk factor for developing conditions like that. So it's almost like a ripple effect, right? It's one thing that then leads to all these other consequences, which is why it's important that we have this conversation. And what you said and what you highlighted is so important. The fact that it's so multifactorial. There's so many things that are at play, right? There's the cost factor, which is a huge deal for families. Right? You go out there and you get a bag full of groceries, predominantly, fruits and vegetables and things and healthy food. And then you have another cart full of like the same amount with sort of more fast foods. It's your money almost seems like it's going a long way when you buy fast food or processed food. But like you are you okay? Yeah. Like you said, it's definitely not doing us good. And so now I think we're going to move on to talk about food as medicine. Like, to me, when I thought about that, what I felt was that we're eating anyway. We eat. I love to eat, right? Most people I know tend to love to eat. So how do we take advantage of that? Like, there's food in front of you. You're going to eat anyway. How do you make sure that that food is serving you well and that is nutritious, is tasty, but more importantly, it's healthy? So what are your thoughts around using food as medicine?
Yeah, so I think that's a great approach, to be honest, is to really focus on the nutrient content of food
Mm.
rather than focusing on calories. So, especially for kids, it's really hard for kids to focus on calorie counting, and really hard
Mm.
for us as parents to say we need to count calories for kids. We
Mm.
just can't do it. And it's not even the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So really focusing on food as medicine and saying, okay, let's focus on these types of food that are really good for your body.
Mm.
They help you grow. They help your hair grow. They help your nails grow. They help you rest and sleep better. They help you have more energy. And so those foods are, whole grains,
Mm.
fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, and healthy fats. And those are, the types of food that we should be incorporating into our diet every day and at every meal. And so if we incorporate, and I will say, dairy as well, but,
Mm.
if you incorporate, whole grains, lean proteins, fruits, veggies, dairy, and healthy fats in every meal, that is your medicine. And that's what's
Mm.
going to help you grow. That's what's going to help you develop. That's going to help you prevent chronic illness and diabetes. I mean, not 100%, but I think you're taking all the steps to use that food that you're eating as medicine. And I think though, eating in that way also does help prevent excess weight gain and helps to combat diabetes as well.
That is so important. So can you give us just some examples when it comes to whole grain, right? If you go to the grocery store, you are seeing aisles and aisles and aisles of bread and rice and and things like that, and all types of grains. So what are some examples just for folks, anybody that's going to be running to the grocery store
Yeah.
today?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I would say things that are white
Yeah.
are, going to be processed.
Yeah.
So a lot of those foods, for example, white bread
Mm.
is more processed because you've taken out the grains out of
Yeah.
that
Mm-hmm.
and made it look that way. So I would pick, something like a brown or
Yeah.
whole wheat bread over the white bread.
Yeah.
I would pick, like sugar, for example, super white, very processed,
Mm.
right? And so I would avoid some of those things. White pasta. And so my kids used to hate me for this because I never buy like the regular pasta in the store, it just says enriched or, the white pasta that you just boil, and it's super cheap, right?
Yeah.
But it really is not adding a lot to your nutrition. And so picking something, even if you picked a whole wheat pasta, that would be better. My personal favorite is some of the chickpea pastas or edamame pastas or lentil pastas. Those are more expensive. And so,
Yeah.
I will say that this is, why I say this is so multifactorial, because if you buy, the regular box of pasta, it's
Yeah.
99 cents, or white bread, it's cheaper than if you buy the
Yeah.
whole wheat bread. And so that's why I think we really need to change our policies to
Yeah.
say, why are some of these unhealthy foods cheaper than the whole grains?
I know.
But those are just some simple examples. And honestly, if you're looking at food in the grocery store, I always tell my patients that we want to do when we go to the grocery store is shop around the grocery store, not in the aisles. Okay, so if you look at almost every grocery store is designed that you go in and you have fruits and veggies on the outside perimeter, and you have your dairy and your eggs and milk, and then and your meats, right?
Yeah.
Your lean meats, everything. And then if you go into the aisles, that's where you're going to find your chips, your cookies, your crackers, your like all of those things. So I'd say first focus on going around the grocery store and filling your cart with those types of foods, and then go into the aisles if you need certain things. But really try to pick and look at the labels and say, if you can't pronounce the food, if you can't pronounce the ingredients, it's probably not like the best thing for you, right?
That's a good way to look at it. I love it.
Yeah. So that's usually been my approach, is just to try to avoid the aisles if I can. I'll pick up my teas and coffees from there, but some of the other things, I think, like oatmeal, for example. If you're going to pick oatmeal, I think that's a good choice over some of the other, more processed cereals to have, because it does keep you fuller longer. It maintains blood sugars. But I will tell you, it's very hard, even as a parent, it's very hard to pick what you should feed your children and yourselves. And even my husband the other day said, I don't know, pick some snacks for these kids because I don't know what to feed them. And so I think it's difficult, right? It's
Mm,
challenging for all
mm,
of us.
mhm, mhm. And it doesn't help that there's just so many choices
Yes,
in the grocery
right,
store, right? It doesn't help that there's so many types of even whole grain pasta, or you know what
right.
I mean? But I think this is a good place to start. So from what I am hearing, especially when it comes to, the carbs and things like that, that you're avoiding things that are white. So
Yes,
that's a good.
yes.
So maybe start off by eliminating by color,
Right. Yeah. And,
right?
that's not to say, everything, but
Yeah,
I would say that would
yeah,
be a good starting place, especially when you're
yeah,
looking at, even things like rice.
yeah.
So I would pick brown rice
Mm,
or wild rice, right?
mm,
That's going
mm-hmm,
to actually not spike your blood sugars up
mm,
super high. And the
mm,
interesting piece about that from a, medical perspective is when you eat the white rice, white bread, white pasta, you're going to get a jump in your blood sugar super
mm,
high. And then
mm,
an hour later, you're going to have a big drop in your blood sugar and you're going to be hungry again.
mm,
And so,
mm.
and then you're going to, you want to eat more of it or eat something else. And
Yeah.
so that's why I always say try to pick like the whole grains or brown rice, brown pasta, because it really doesn't spike your blood sugar as high. It really makes it more sustained. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to be hungry in an hour.
Yeah, yeah, that is so valid. Now when it comes to, I mean, of course, the fruits and the vegetables, I think that's a given. And usually, do you just try to encourage people to try variety or just stick to a certain type
Yeah,
of like fruits
yeah,
and
I
veggies or
do. I
mm-hmm,
do. I mean, there are certain fruits and that have a high spike your blood sugar higher, but I
mm-hmm,
really try not to focus on that because
yeah,
I would rather have kids especially eat any fruit or veggie over like chips
choose. Yeah,
or cookies,
mm,
right? Because it just has the fiber that they
yeah,
need and it has the vitamins that they need. So I
mm,
would say I would, pick those, apples, berries. I mean, those things, I think are great. But anything that they can really, that they enjoy, and I would
mm-hmm,
encourage them to try new fruits
yeah,
and new veggies.
mm-hmm,
At a later point, if we really talk about, oh, they're eating too much fruit, then we sort of hone in on maybe cutting out or changing some of those things. But I would say, for the most part, fruits and veggies, really, I have no issue with that at all.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's perfect. How about the healthy fats? What are some, when it comes to that, what should folks look out for? I'm talking about that mom that's currently making her grocery list as we're speaking. So,
Yeah. So healthy fats, olive oil,
mm,
nuts. So nuts and seeds, all of those
mm,
things are really good.
mm,
And avocados are,
yeah.
good source of healthy fats.
Mm-hmm,
And so I would say that would be, just to say, if you're looking at the oil that you're cooking with, I would focus on, using olive
mm,
oil and just avocado oil too, but that's a little bit more expensive. And then, any nuts or seeds that you want to add to your meal. You could add hummus. I mean, some of those things have protein and they have a little bit of extra fat in
mm-hmm.
them. But I think that's also important for kids to grow and develop as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. This has been so helpful. And again, these are just pointers. Granted that we're looking at this as not just the food to enjoy, but something that's actually going to serve us well.
Hmm.
And so it might feel like an investment, but then we're getting the benefits that will, hopefully curb, decrease the risk of obesity and all the other consequences down the line. So
Yes.
I think it's really, really helpful. Now let's tie this to sleep because one way or the other,
Mhm.
everyone I have on, I somehow I somehow bring you
Yeah.
back to sleep, right?
Yeah.
So, I had mentioned the fact that one of the things I see a lot is with teenagers who are maybe they're not sleeping, they're sleeping later, right? Because their body clock is shifted.
Mhm.
And so they're snacking a lot because they're awake in the evening and everybody else has gone to sleep. They're grabbing the chips from the pantry because they've been busy all day. They've been doing their sports, they've been, doing homework, and
Right.
they've not necessarily had a chance, or now they're really, really hungry. And so that's one thing I see that a lot of teenagers are doing, and sometimes some even younger kids too. And then the other piece is around a lot of children, even after they've had dinner, it's time for bed. It becomes this stalling of, I'm hungry again. Can I have a cookie? Can I? And so those are two two things where, bedtime snack, and I always encourage, I'm like, have a bedtime snack, but we have to figure out a way to balance it where it's not like this whole large meal, or it's not a snack that's laden with sugar and things like that. So
Right.
what are some of your thoughts around approaching that and making sure that we're striking a balance?
Yeah, so like I mentioned to you, I've treated a lot of kids with diabetes, type
Mm,
1 diabetes, and especially. And so we always think, we had always talked about to our kids with type 1 diabetes to have snacks and
mhm,
sometimes have snacks at bedtime.
mm,
So, I'm sort of used to that. And I think what I always say is if we're going to do a snack, let's try to make sure that we have a protein with it, and
mhm,
then we can have a carb. So even something as simple as a whole grain piece of bread
mhm,
with like deli meat, I'm okay with
mm,
that. Um, put some veggies in there, and you can have half a sandwich, and that's like
mhm,
your snack, right? I mean,
mhm,
some culture. And sometimes, that works, especially for the teens, and it gives them protein, it gives them their slow acting carb that sort of sustains them through the night, really provides slow blood sugar.
mhm.
And so, sorry, my dog is, uh, so the other piece of that is that a yogurt, like a Greek yogurt, also is a
Mhm,
good choice with berries. So I think that's a good choice as well. And
mhm,
hummus and carrots. So really anything that you have that has protein and then some carbs
mhm,
in it. You can do
mhm,
hard-boiled eggs. Um, I mean, you can do oatmeal, and sometimes for the teenagers, I have them add some protein powder to that. You can do a protein shake,
mhm.
and that's okay to sort of sustain you in a banana. And so I think there are good choices that you can pick. It's just, for the parents, making sure that you have those available at home and having, apple and peanut butter, for example, like having that on the counter so that you are having your teen see that it's visible. They don't
Yeah.
have to go into the pantry. And actually, my own pantry now has like very limited things that my kids can eat. And so they go into the kitchen and they're like, we just have fruit, mom. I'm like, yeah, that's what we have. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think just having that be available. And then as a parent, being a role model for them so that you're not really
Mhm,
going into the pantry and snacking on some of those foods.
mhm.
And having chips and cookies and all those things for sleep purposes, all it's going to do when I've seen it in my diabetics is really raise their blood sugars
Yeah.
and then go low, then they end up going low when they're up again at night
Yeah.
eating, wanting to eat.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. So protein and carb is really my go-to.
That's that's excellent. And there's so many choices here that you just told us, which we can learn from because yeah, the kids get hungry. The teen who's maybe they had dinner earlier and now they're starving, or like you said, you have patients who have diabetes. We don't want them to go and have their blood sugar dropping. And one of the reasons why even women and kids, one of the common sleep, what I call sleep disruptors that can actually wake you up in the middle of the night is low blood sugar. So it's not about not eating, it's about making the right choice. So you don't want to have like a whole heavy meal, like heavy steak
Right,
and
right,
all sorts
right,
of things right before bed, but having a snack that will help sustain that blood sugar. And I love the examples you've given, whole grain and protein. So think whole grain and protein,
right,
and you can incorporate it. And the key is making it easily accessible, especially in the
right.
evening, because when we're tired, when we're exhausted at the end of a long day, the ability to make the right decisions is kind of lower. It's a little bit lower.
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
you make those choices easy, then it just makes things go smoother.
Yeah, and the other piece of that I'll say is, it's actually it takes a little bit more work for your teen to go cut an
Mm.
apple and, get like the
Yeah.
peanut butter or get the yogurt out of the fridge versus going and getting some chips, right?
Mm.
It's just the packaging, right?
Yeah.
So, maybe having some things cut up for your teen and having it available so that they can have access to it and eat it, relatively quickly.
Yeah, I love it. And keep the chips and the cookies in the back of the pantry.
Hmm. Right,
So
right,
again, it's about behavior. It's about
right,
reinforcing good
right,
behavior. So make the good habits easily accessible, and the less optimal, less accessible.
right, 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 exactly.
Yep, I love that. I love that. So one more question, and then would love to hear about how to work with you.
Sure,
Now,
sure.
there's this myth of sort of another thing that I see a lot is with a sugar rush, right? Like kids drinking juice in the evening or eating something really, really sugary, and then now they're really, really hyper. And
Yeah.
I've just always wondered, and I've had quite a few people ask about that. Like, why is it that they suddenly get so hyper if they have like either a sugary snack and things? And then what is it about sugar? Like, is there any form of, are there any good calories in sugar at all? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I would say, I think that kids do get this what you call sugar rush, or they do have this spike in their blood sugar,
Hmm.
and it does affect kids differently. It affects all kids differently. It may not cause that behavior change in every kid, but I think it is real, even though I don't really have a physiological answer for it, other
Hmm.
than the big spike in blood sugar.
Hmm.
I personally am really not a fan of juice at all. And I've gotten a lot of people, my patients especially, crying in the office when I tell them not to drink juice. And I get people upset about it because juice has been marketed as being healthy. It has
Yes.
vitamins, it has a lot of, vitamin C and things like that. And while I agree, but the reality is that juice that you buy at the grocery store often has a lot of added sugar in
Mm.
it. And that added sugar gets converted in your body and ends up having you have, increased weight over
Mm.
time.
Mm.
And so, not to mention the portions of the juice that we drink, it
Yeah.
really should be no more than 4 ounces. And 4 ounces is a really small cup.
Mm.
And, when people are drinking juice, they're really not drinking,
Four
4 ounces of juice. They're
ounces.
drinking a lot more than that. And so
Mm.
already if you're drinking 8 ounces of juice, that's like double the sugar that you need in a
Mm.
day.
Mm.
So I'd rather have my patients, or anybody really, eat fruit. So have an orange, you have the fiber. It takes longer to eat it. You're not going to eat, 5 oranges. Whereas if you have that one glass of juice, it actually may be 5 or 6 oranges in that
Mm.
glass. And
Mm.
so the portions are really things that are hard to control with juice.
Yeah.
But kids love it. And so, it causes tooth decay, it causes a lot of other issues. It can lead to poor sleep, again, I think for the same reason, because of that spike
Yeah.
in blood sugar and then that drop in blood sugar. And that spike in blood sugar leads them to have, that sugar rush or that increased
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there is some truth to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just gonna put a plug in. If you have like a young toddler or an infant, definitely do not put juice in their feeding bottle, because I've seen that happen a lot. One, because then they're taking a lot of it, and it can increase their chance, especially if they're going to bed right after.
Right.
It can increase their chance of tooth
Caffeine.
decay.
Yeah, right.
Plus, it's just not helpful for their sleep as well. So
Right.
definitely thank you for bringing that up. Any other final words? We've talked about so much. We've talked about how what the state of obesity right now in the US and
Mm-hmm.
what is really driving it. We've talked about just the many factors that can contribute. So it's not just one thing, right? And then we've also talked about how to use sleep as sleep is medicine, but how to use food as medicine.
Right, right, right.
And how to look at your food differently. It's not just stuff that's going to just fill your stomach and curb hunger, but it's actually something that's going to help you stay healthy and live longer and help your child as well. So, and then we've talked about we went through different examples of what options you can look out for when you're going to the grocery store, and how to pick those items strategically, knowing that even if they cost a little bit more, there's so many ways around this. There are a lot of stores have sales and discounts and
Right.
membership cards and things that we can take advantage of, because this is really important things. And we also went through some really, really cool examples of what you can have as a nighttime snack for your kids and even for you as well, and the importance of being a good role model as a parent in terms of healthy eating. Did I miss anything else? Was there anything
No,
else
I
you wanted
think
to
you got,
add?
I think you got, I think you got, just about everything. And I
Yeah.
would say the only last words I'd want to say is, change in diet happens
Mm.
gradually. So it
Mm.
doesn't happen overnight. And so I think it's important for parents not to beat themselves up over it. And, we're all trying the best that we can, but
Yeah.
making, one simple change, I think, is a good thing. Like, now we are not having juice anymore in the house, except, for special occasions. And that's
Mm.
what we try. And, then the next time you try something else, or when you go to the grocery store, you pick up like, one of the whole grain pastas, or you pick
Mm.
up a whole grain bread instead of your regular loaf, and just make simple, small changes. And I think over time, you start to appreciate that food and learn how your body reacts to some of those new foods. So I think that's
Mm-hmm.
important to say that it's just, it doesn't happen overnight and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And that is so true because sometimes we feel maybe a sense of, oh, I'm not doing it right. And then we want to go on overdrive. I think making one change at a time. And I say the same thing about sleep, right? You maybe sleeping 6 hours, but don't go to bed now and try to get 9 hours in. You'll feel overwhelmed because your body's probably maybe just not used to that. But making those little stepwise changes will get you to your goal. Um, yeah, thanks. This has been awesome.
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, thank you
So
for having me. Yeah.
how do we work with you? Where do we find you and how do you where can people find you and how can they work with you?
Yeah, so I am located, on Instagram at Dr. R. Mehra. So I always try to put some recipes and some healthy food tips
Mm,
on there, and information for parents. And then I'm also located physically in Virginia. So if anyone's located in Virginia, they can see me in the office. But I do a lot of telemedicine, and to work with me, they can look at www.themeraclinic.com, which is my clinic, and enroll, or call me and see if it's the right approach for them. But this is really what I'm passionate about, is focusing on children with diabetes prevention and pediatric weight management. So I think it's a very important topic that hasn't been really addressed
yeah.
well.
Yeah. Yeah. And by an expert like with your experience as well as your background and training and things like that. So this is just so valuable. Thanks for taking the time to meet with
Yeah, thank you
me.
so much. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, everyone. It was good hanging out with you. Until next time, rest well.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks. Bye.